Hello, class. Week one is over. We're beginning week two. These 4 weeks will fly by. Let me give you a little feedback on week one. Chapter one discussion board. Y'all did a really good answer with that. You did really well. Um, the answer really to the question, what, if anything, does this answer tell us about capability to learn or students' motivation? The answer is nothing until we talk to the student. Silly answers, and you've gotten them in your class, you'll get them in your class. I get them from students in the MSA program sometimes. It's hard to determine intent or the reasons why by looking at the answers. What you do know is the student either didn't know it or refused to answer it, but you need to talk to the student to get back and find out why. If this is a common occurrence, I would definitely have a conversation with the student. Depending on the question, depending on the test, depending on the importance of it, you may do that after one example of a silly answer. But I would pull that student to a side, not in front of other students, between classes or after school, before school, or even in the hallway, and just say, I saw your silly answer, and try and get down to why. They may put it down because they completely do not understand the question, right? That it may be at a level higher than they can answer. So it could actually be their capability to learn. They just don't understand the concept, or aren't able to understand the concept. And so it's important, especially important for that, because if you're asking questions or you're putting content in your questions, or the way you phrase your questions, or the level of thinking required by your questions, and the students aren't prepared or the students aren't capable of answering, then that may be a clue. Often in class, if you do not do a very good job, or if a teacher, not you, if a teacher does not do a very good job of questioning, some students are able to get by the entire period or even weeks on end without ever answering a question. And so the only way a teacher really can understand their ability, capability, or if they do grasp the concept or the thinking level or the content, is through the answers to their papers, their formative assessments. So if you get these silly answers, that may be a clue that what you are assessing is not in line with what you're teaching, and that the students aren't at that level yet. If you did a whole lot of knowledge-based teaching in your classroom, and then your question is higher level, those students may not have the conceptual framework. They may not have the thinking ability or practice to answer that kind of question. More than likely, most silly answers are maybe just lack of motivation to learn. They could easily do it. They're smart enough to do it. But for some reason, they're not engaged in the content. They're not engaged in the teaching. And so you need to talk to a student about that, because, again, that also is an issue in that I always hear teachers say, well, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. Well, you're not teaching unless the students are learning, okay? And so it's important to kind of get to see this as maybe a warning signal for some, saying, hey, there's a motivation issue, there's a engagement issue. I see these now in these questions, these silly answers, so let me investigate, find out what's going on. Because you do not want that to go on for a long term. You'll lose the student will not be successful. So I think that's important too, is also to get at the motivation. Why did the student do that? And then the other thing about silly answers or silly test answers is if this is atypical for a student, it could signal something else that's going on in that student's life. I see that especially in middle and high school. Kids B and A average, B average in a class, and then all of a sudden they start really not even trying, and they put down silly answers. Occasionally that's because they went out the night before and had a party, and they're hungover, or they're drunk, or they the night before and they didn't study. If that's a one-time thing, maybe. But if it's going on day after day after day, and it's a change, then that could be a signal that something's going on in that child's life. And having a conversation with that child, maybe putting that child in touch with the counseling services at your school. So again, that may be. So I think it's very important to talk to the students to find out why they put down these silly answers. Now, if you're a teacher, again, I kind of told you what I as a teacher should do. As a principal, let's say I'm observing a teacher, and I see these kind of answers as I walk around the classroom, maybe in a walkthrough or in an observation. I'm going to be concerned based on the teacher's response. The teacher cannot be flippant about these kind of answers, and if I see that, then I have a conversation with that teacher and pretty much just say what I said to y'all a few minutes ago about you need to talk to the student and find out the motivation or the why they gave these silly answers. So it really depends on how the teacher responds to those silly answers. If they put down silly answers to the student's silly answer, or silly, then that's one thing. If they're very flippant about it, that's another thing. If they hold it against the student. So I think as a principal, you need to kind of keep an eye on teachers to see how they respond to these and how they use these as teaching tools or tools to understand the student more, of the student's needs, and maybe if their needs are not being met. Okay? Overall, though, you did a fantastic job with that. Well, let me kind of talk about now week 2. Week 2 is really on chapters 4 through 6. There is an assignment on SchoolNet, and I want to talk a little bit about that. So I have revised it, tweaked it since it went out in the syllabus a week ago. Right? SchoolNet is a wonderful tool for teachers to do formative assessment when you're trying to align the tested and the taught and written curriculum. I know a lot of good teachers who do not use SchoolNet. I know a lot of struggling teachers that if they use SchoolNet and used it well, would improve their instruction and improve student achievement because it gives them feedback, very specific feedback based on standards in the standard course of study that they can revise their teaching. I see a lot of teachers, they'll wait till they give a major test and come back and say, ooh, this kid made a 60 on it. Well, it's kind of too late to go back then. So I want you to be familiar with it. I want you to address this assignment from the principal's perspective. So put yourself in the shoes of an administrator. Most of you, or many of you, probably are at schools that use SchoolNet. So I'd like you to pull a test. It could be a test you used this past semester, a test you used last fall. Pull a test that you had administered to students. If you do not use SchoolNet, reach out to one of your classmates and say, can I borrow a test and some reports? Or if there's someone at your school that uses SchoolNet, touch base with them, all right? I'm not too worried about student FERPA laws with student names. If you want to cross them out, go ahead. But this is confidential, and they'll be, whatever I get online will not be shared. Then I want you to run reports and see what reports are out there. Now, as a teacher, you may be using quite a few of them. You may not. So I want you to just kind of spend some time going through SchoolNet with that test and look to see what kind of reports does it give you? What information does it provide you? Because then what I'd like you to do is I would like you to pretend to be a principal and that this is a SchoolNet test and you're trying to help this teacher improve their instruction. So you then would kind of offer some suggestions for a teacher of what reports to use and how to use them to address students' inconsistencies, address students' weaknesses. What I'm going to do then is probably early this week, Monday, Tuesday, or even into Wednesday, I'm going to share some SchoolNet best practices. I want you to kind of run these reports first, but then I'm going to publish on this Canvas some best practices for you. So please look up for those coming up later in this week. All right. The rest of Chapter 2, let me give you just a little tip on when you do your presentations. Please go look at other classmates' presentations on their chapters. I expect all of you to read all the chapters, but go back and look at what your classmates are presenting. If you do use a PowerPoint, which is fine, please do not read the PowerPoint. We all are highly educated, and if you just read the PowerPoint word for word next to your presentation, then I'm going to count off on that. The PowerPoint should have either pictures, diagrams, keywords, just to guide your conversation in your presentation. All right, but this is really this is a major part of this class, is your classmates' presentation. So please make sure you go out and you watch all of your classmates' presentations on all these chapters. All right, I hope you have a good week, and I will again next week, next Sunday when this was released, the next video, I'll go back and give a little feedback on week 2 and how things are going. All right. Thank you so much.